Hello and welcome to today's recording of Talking to Introverts, a podcast set up by myself, Denise Oliver, and my co-host and co-introvert, co-working introvert.
Hello, I'm Sami Blackford.
Hello. We both have our own businesses and we also collaborate on the podcast and other things. So you can find us all over the place. I'm a grief and loss. I have a specialism in grief and loss coaching for the midlife introverted woman. And Sami, you are a creative brand strategist. And recently, the reason I'm sort of stammering and stuttering over this is, am I a specialist or am I an expert or what do you think you are? But then you actually asked a question via our newsletter and in our social media group, the Business Enrichment Cafe, about calling ourselves what?
Yes, so the question I posed was, how do you feel or how would you feel about calling yourself an expert? And I've been reading this book recently, Expert Secrets by Russell Brunson. And as the name suggests, it's all about taking on or acquiring or putting yourself in that role of an expert, like owning being an expert. And I've read others of his books and always shied away from reading that one because of the title. And I just as I was like, it can't just be me. Like, I wonder what other people and women, in our case, in our community, how other people feel about this word. So that's why I posed the question. And I have never called myself an expert. Even in my previous business, where I had 15 years experience in the skincare industry, I knew a lot of stuff. I never called myself an expert. I was a skin specialist. I wasn't an expert. And then when I looked into, when I was writing the newsletter, I was like, I wonder what like the actual definition of an expert is. So just had a chat with Google and brought back, like the dictionary definitions. And it's like somebody who has a lot of knowledge in a certain area, in their area of I was going to say area of expertise. Interesting. I was like, that is a bit of an eye-opener to me, because nowhere does it say that they know everything. It's just like they have a lot of knowledge. And so that was what made me, ask in our community, how would you feel about that? And like I said, like I've always called myself a skin specialist. Well, in my previous business, the response that we got in the community was like, I've never called myself an expert. I call myself a specialist. And I've heard you do it when you introduce yourself in networking meetings. My specialism is. I don't know if that's like, I don't want to get into gender right now, but I don't know if it's more of a woman thing. Like, we don't want to claim that we're experts. I don't know if it's an upbringing thing, because one of the people who commented, and I've got it in front of me now, said that she always calls herself a specialist rather than a expert. And I was like, oh, why is that? And she said her dad used to say that an X is something that has been, and a spurt is a drip under pressure. I was like, yeah, that's going to make you shy away from it. If your dad's always telling you that, that's going to make you not want to be an expert or call yourself an expert. And I know, like, in my upbringing, if somebody was introducing you, like on news or whatever, on the news or in the media or something, as like, this is so-and-so, he's an expert in whatever, there'd always be that response of, oh, well, if he's an expert, then it's like that. I don't know, there's always been like this resistance to experts. And that's been a lot of why I have avoided the word.
So would you, having said all that, having questioned it, having read the book, if you were to go back to your days with your skincare business, would you now say that you were an expert?
I don't know. And this is something like that I have this conversation with myself now since kind of reading this book and putting the question out there. It's like, But would I now call myself an expert? And there's still a lot of resistance. And I think that's, that what would other people think? There's still that going on in the back of my mind. So probably not. But I think at some point in the future I probably will. But there's that journey, that deconditioning journey I need to go on before I can get comfortable with that.
Is there someone that is well known that you're aware of that does call themselves an expert? And would you agree that they are an expert in whatever it is they're talking about? I can think of one person. Well, I can think of two actually.
Oh, well, now I'm just intrigued about who you're thinking about. So this guy who wrote this book, Russell Brunson, and I will link the book below if you're interested in reading it. He calls himself an expert in funnels, so that's his thing. Like he's on sales funnels and marketing funnels and that kind of thing. And I would agree. Like he's been in this game for however many years, like a decade at least. And if there was somebody that I had a question about funnels, he's the one I would go to kind of find out. And I think that's it about being an expert. If somebody would come to you to ask you about whatever it is your field of knowledge, then they must see you as the person to go to. So in their eyes, you have a level of expertise in that thing. But then, from the position of the expert, there's always going to be that imposter syndrome, isn't there? That little voice is like, who are you to call yourself an expert? What are people going to think? What's your mum going to think? Like,
Well, okay, so I'm going to the person I was thinking of, the first person that came to mind. She's a woman, she's amazing, she's American, she's Brené Brown, and she's referred to as an expert in vulnerability. This has
yeah,
been her research for years and years. And that amazing speech, that TED talk that she's done
oh
about
yeah,
where she's been challenged about being an expert by people who clearly don't understand what she's done all these years. And I just love her use of, I think it's Theodore Roosevelt, Man in the Arena speech. And basically, she says, if you're not prepared to get in the arena with me and talk about this the way I know I can, I'm not interested in what you've got to say. And that's how she deals with any imposter syndrome. And it comes up for all of us. The self-doubt, the self-criticism, and the stress that goes along with that comes up for her. And so she was the first person I thought of as you were talking about being an expert, what you've read about being an expert, and then cringing at the thought of calling yourself an expert and like shying away from it, really. And that there's many people out there, they wouldn't call themselves experts, but other people do. And the reason I say that is I've just completed a David Kessler grief educator course. David Kessler is well known in the arena of grief and loss, but he wouldn't call himself an expert. Other people do. And he says the reason for that is that basically he's worked with grief and loss all his working days. He was a volunteer in a hospice, still does, from the age of like 17, 18, and then went on to study things. He's been on committees, he's runs courses on this. And he says, I can't call myself an expert. He said, yes, I know a lot. I know a lot more than a lot of people do because I've dedicated my life so far to this. He's not only dedicated his life from the outside looking in, he's experienced his own grief and loss. He knows what it's like. And yet he says there is still far too much that he doesn't know about grief and loss. So from that point of view, he won't call himself an expert, but so many other people do. He's brought onto panels as an expert because of what he knows. So I think it's interesting that he, as the person, he doesn't want to say that he is an expert, that he appears on podcasts, TV shows, because he's one of those people whose life's work has been dedicated to looking at grief and loss and opening up the topic of it. Just like Brené Brown, her whole focus has been on vulnerability. That's what the word came down to. She's worked on many things, written many books, but actually, what all of those books and that research and work that she's done is about vulnerability, especially as women. And I don't necessarily think that she thinks of herself as an expert. Again, it's a title that is given from the outside in, because the expert is still looking at more information, research, new stuff that comes out. For me personally, I wouldn't call myself an expert. My pivoting into the work of grief and loss has only been in the last 2.5 years. And I know, no matter what I read, no matter who I listen to, no matter what course I go on, there is still so much more about grief and loss that I haven't read, that I don't know about. And it's not even about being taken seriously. I actually don't care about that. I know what I know. So that's why I talk about having a specialism and specializing in this much more narrow field of coaching a midlife introverted woman who has experience of grief and loss, rather than I'm a coach. I can empower you. It's a bit like niching, really. I think having a specialism, that's what I'm doing, is I'm drilling down on all the knowledge and information and courses that I've done, and I'm putting them into this category here.
Yeah. Yeah, and I suppose it's like we've used this example before when we've been talking about niching. Like in the medical world, like doctors will specialize, but then also is specializing in something different from being an expert in something? Because surely, like to me, now that I'm talking about it, specializing is making that choice. It's like, I'm not going to do all of these things. I'm going to focus on this one particular thing. And then becoming an expert in it is a different thing. As in, like we've talked about the different people that we've talked about, it's a time thing. Like, I'm not saying there's a specific amount of time you have to be in this chosen field, but it's a time and experience and knowledge gained thing by the sounds of things. If we avoid calling ourselves experts until we know absolutely everything, we're never going to know absolutely everything because there's always going to be new information coming out. Does that mean that it's an unattainable thing?
It's that infinity thing.
Yeah.
It's like there's always something else. Always. So I can relate this to what you just said there about doctors specializing. So doctors have a very lengthy training because there's so much they have to learn basically. Then they go out and practice on us humans. God love us. And they go through a process to gain their stripes, basically, to attain as much experience as they can. And somewhere along the line, they know that they like a particular topic. And that topic becomes their speciality. So, hearts, brains, kidneys, lungs, digestive system, whatever that speciality is for whatever reason. And it strikes me, a speciality just like funnels that person into that career, into that topic. When I think about the people in medicine that I'm aware of who are known as the experts, they are the ones that, like, I can't remember his name now, the guy who did the first heart transplant. the doctor who developed IVF, they were the experts in that field because of the leap that they took to actually bring it into mainstream domain. Now, a heart transplant, if you're matched up, if it's not, donor wise, if it's going to work tissue to tissue, isn't now seen as something extraordinary. So I wonder if becoming an expert is that you've reached that extraordinary level in something. And it's like you've taken that speciality, which is like funneling all your general knowledge, learning about that speciality, but then it opens up again because you've gone so deep and so wide into all the information that you've gone beyond being a specialist. You are now the go-to person, the expert, the person that everyone wants to talk to. The press want to know you, as it would be now. Every podcaster wants you to come onto their podcast and talk to them because you have that depth and breadth of information that possibly other people haven't bothered to go down the route of. They've actually been happy to stay as a specialist and letting someone else do all the extra work, and they just go, okay, I'll have that in now, thanks. I'm a specialist who also knows about your work and your work and your work, but I'm all right not being the expert, the one and only. Think about IVF now. What's he called? Robert Winston, I think he was back in the day, who developed IVF. And now it's not unusual to just hear it talked about in conversation, that women go for IVF. Men need it as well. But the woman is usually the person that has to have the more intense treatment. And if this guy hadn't specialised and taken a tiny bit of gynecology and really focused intently, probably never saw his family, was working all the hours God sent because he was so focused. And is it that it's that focus that equals expertise, equals you become an expert? What's your man called, whose book you read with the ClickFunnels thing?
Russell Brunson.
He has focused in on something that businesses, he believes, requires, or certain businesses do. And he's become the go-to guy because of that focus. And I don't believe these days it comes down to an age thing. I think younger people can call themselves experts. It's that whole thing of narrowing your vision within a speciality.
Yeah. Yeah, I was going to say it is linked with niching or specializing or choosing a narrower path within the whole field that you're in.
Yeah.
I think rarely do you find an expert in healthcare, for example, whereas you'll find, like you said, the expert in IVF or heart transplants or, whatever.
Back in the day, they were, wow, mind blown. And they've become so much more part of mainstream medicine that it's just seen as a speciality rather than this guy was the expert on this. He discovered this. He did the experiments in this, put the hours in to become the expert. And it must happen in other industries, let's say, I don't know, construction, for instance. There's got to be people who are heads of companies who are the go-to in construction. The picture I've got in my head is in London somewhere. One day I'll go and find it. There are two buildings that are joined by an overhead, completely see-through swimming pool. And that blows my mind. And I'm like, who knew that was the thing? That was something you could do. You could be swimming up in the sky, and I'm just like, whoa, that's just like, who is the person that has developed that? Because if you think about experts, people are called in as expert witnesses in all sorts of juries, trials, that sort of thing. But I wonder in that instance what the judge is looking for, what the system is looking for to
Mm.
call someone an expert witness.
But then also, like using that example, the prosecution will have their expert witness and the defense will have their expert witness. And they can be experts in the same topic,
Yeah.
the same niche, but they will have contradictory evidence, ideas, thoughts, opinions. And so that kind of like you don't have, not everybody has to agree with you, which is one of the things that when I was writing the newsletters, like that comes back to the, what's it called? Oh, what's the word? Like the internal insecurity.
Imposter.
Imposter syndrome, that's the one. That comes back to that because like I know from my own experience, and I would imagine for a lot of women especially, and men, I would say, is like, but what if I say something and somebody disagrees? Somebody who's in the same industry, not just some troll online, but somebody who's in the same industry and has the same level of experience, what if they disagree? And that's why I avoided avoided the term expert for so many years, because if somebody who, so for myself, like I was self-taught, I didn't have any formal education in skincare, dermatology, anything like that. It was all self-taught over 15 years. But I know that if I had said something, somebody who'd had, you know, just come out of university with a dermatology degree or whatever, disagreed, I'd be like, oh yeah, okay, no, I'm sorry, I didn't.
Yeah, I understand that because I recently went to see a GP because I've had a flare up of my skin, which is linked to Lyme's disease, and felt really quite ill with it. And nothing I have ever, in all the years I've experienced this, nothing from a doctor, nothing from a dermatologist. And the dermatologist is a consultant doctor who's specialized in looking at skin, and skin is very difficult to diagnose and what is wrong and then treat. It's very difficult indeed. I've worked in a dermatology clinic and it's just like, oof, a lot of it is like literally stabbing around in the dark, and you just get this blanket diagnosis because it's more than just your skin, you know. Anyway, and nothing that anybody gave me ever comforted in any way. In fact, it seemed to make it worse, the skin reaction that I have, which is horrible. It's really painful, uncomfortable, itchy, scrap. It's awful. And yet you come along going, oh, I know what will work on your skin. I'm like, okay, I'll try anything, anything. And it does, like bloody miracle cream. It's incredible. I went to see this guy because of this exacerbation that I've had. We don't know what the cause of it is. We don't know why it's come up right now. And I take your cream along, and he looks at the ingredients and he goes, this works. And like, he's like, what else have you tried? I said, well, not this time around, because this is the one, this is my go-to now, because I know it calms it down ridiculously quickly. It's incredible. And he just handed it back to me after looking at the product. He said, I could recommend a base product that would be similar to this, but it wouldn't have the other stuff in, the other stuff being calendula and what's the other one that's in it?
Sweet violet.
Violet, yeah. And he's just laughing and he's like, yeah. And he's like, so your friend makes this? And like, yeah, in their kitchen. And he's like, right. I mean, you can see the cogs turning like, how many years have I been a doctor? How qualified am I? But your friend who's not done any of this has created this cream that sorts your skin out. And my skin was horrible, absolutely awful, weeping, and oh, it was terrible. And I'm like, yeah. Here's the pictures of what it looked like 6 days ago. And look at it now. I showed him my skin now, and he's like, and that's just because you're using this cream. I'm like, yep. So it's a very, I think, arbitrary use of language that there is, if someone is attempting to put themselves perhaps in a category that is different to this one or this one. And that's why I use the consultant, specialist, expert example in medicine, because that's the world I know. So, yeah, it was so funny. And to me, if I want to know something about skin, you are the person I want to talk to because of your years of experience with it. Not
Mm.
everything can be settled with our bodies through science and medicine. It just can't. There are other things, other knowledge that we've had for eons before medicine was like created by men. Those poor men.
I know we keep getting a dig at them, don't we, on
Yeah,
this podcast?
but it is. It's yeah. So it's a very. I think a word that I've seen used about these terms is very nuanced. So, like, I wouldn't even use the word consultant because to me, a consultant is someone who is medically qualified as a doctor, and yet there are
Mm.
consultants in the engineering industry. There are consultants. I don't know, everywhere. There must be. I can't think of anything else right now. And those consultants will have specialized in specific areas. And then somewhere along the line, they become experts. It's like, I'm just thinking
Yeah,
about gardening right now. So it's like, is Monty Don an expert gardener because of everything he's done over the years? And he's always on the telly and he's got his Instagram account and he seems to never be at a loss for telling you anything about any plant ever. Is he an expert or is he a gardening specialist?
mm. Well, I used to listen to Gardener's Question Time on Radio 4,
Yeah.
and there would be, I can't remember her name now, but there was one panelist who was quite a regular panelist, and she would be like what's it called? Pests expert. So
Uh,
within gardening, it wasn't Bunny Guinness.
Pippa Greenwood?
Yes. Um, so within gardening, she specialised in, I don't know if she chose to or if she just became the expert in.
I remember listening to it. She was fascinated by the whole environment and watching creepy crawlies crawl over things. Some of them eat things and some of them not.
Mm.
So, yeah, so she went down and obviously she did very well out of it because not many people were looking at that at the time.
So again, it's kind of like she chose to specialise in that area and became the expert.
Yeah,
And like maybe it doesn't matter what label we give ourselves, whether we're a specialist, whether we're an expert. I was going to say whether we're a consultant, but there is specific roles within like consultant or coach or mentor or
yeah,
whatever else, isn't there? Like consultants, I think go into a business and advise. They don't do anything. Um, they don't do anything. Consultants don't do anything, but as in they don't get involved in the doing of putting the plan into action. They will offer advice and say you should do this, this, and this. Off you go. To any consultants listening, I mean, no.
it's no, you've got a point actually, because certainly I know the NHS has had to change because less and less men, in particular, have gone into medicine. More and more women have, and there's still not enough people wanting to be doctors anymore. It's just not there. But back in the day, if you think about a ward round when everyone was in their beds neat and tidy, just like Doctor in the House or whatever it was called, the consultant had his team. He was the one that said what needed to be done, and everyone ran around doing it. So, yeah, you're right.
Mm,
Consultant is that, or it was. Consultants have to do a lot more these days
yeah,
because there's just
and
not enough
then
bots to do everything.
and then I mean, like these are just descriptions off the top of my head. I could be wrong, but then like a coach kind of gets more involved with like the may not maybe not in the actual doing of actions, but in the process. And then a mentor generally would be unpaid, I think, is
Yeah.
the traditional way, and would be more of
To me, a mentor is someone who has they're quite the expert really in many
mm,
ways, but they're working in a company and there's these new guys and girls, these apprentices that need to learn that job.
mm,
Basically, it's see one, do one. They have to virtually copy what this person knows. So that's what I see as a mentor. It's within a company, usually, I think. Mind you, you have people like mentors in the things like the Prince's Trust. People volunteer to mentor someone who's starting out in business in the Prince's Trust. They don't get paid for it, they just love doing
mm.
the volunteer work.
And that's again a similar sort of situation. It's like, I did this to run my business. You could do this to run your business, sort
Yeah,
of thing.
it's the passing on of information
Mm.
that's
Yeah, and I
pertinent.
think it's more of a life experience kind of sharing rather than, I don't know, like an education, like this is what I'm trained to teach sort of thing.
Yeah, it's just words, isn't it? And
Yeah.
people are always looking to, some people want the word, the buzzword, and other people hold back from using them. Like you say, you wouldn't then, probably not even now, call yourself a skin expert. You had a specialist topic around things that help the skin, and you created products that you knew from natural ingredients would help the skin.
Mm. But going back to like the word expert, I think I avoided that because I felt like I should know everything, which,
Yeah.
you know, is just an impossible thing to
But
achieve.
also, again, there is that pressure. You haven't done a degree or
Mm,
more than one degree. You know, you don't have that the letters after your name that are considered to be the credibility. You
mm,
have the experience. You don't have the formal education.
yeah,
You educated yourself. You know, trial and error and experience for me is as big a role as just having these facts.
yeah.
And it's crazy how, when I think back years ago when this all kicked off back in 2007, 2008, and I just looked horrendous, like the creature from the deep. It was just awful the way it had come out. The inflammation was really hard to live with. I had chronic fatigue as a result. But because when I went to see a doctor who specialised in dermatology, she opened her book in front of me and asked me questions. Have you been here? Have you been there? Have you been in contact with this? Then it's not Lyme's disease, because this is what we know about Lyme's disease here. So I don't think she even now would say she was an expert, because everything she asked me, they wouldn't ask you now, because
Mm,
they know that Lyme's disease is a much more complex and complicated picture than they've ever recognized it could be. And so she wasn't the expert. There wasn't enough information for her to be the expert then. Don't think she's even working now. Can't remember her name. Um, and it's like, thank God, more and more people like experienced it in this country, not necessarily from tick bites. Mine was mosquito bites, and somewhere along the way, doctors, GPs, had started to put a picture together that became something. But there's no one person who's an expert in Lyme's disease that I'm aware of, because
mm.
there's not enough information yet.
Yeah. And perhaps the expert is the person who looks beyond like
Yeah.
this set of questions in this textbook and says, actually, what if it's not just this? And like you were saying before about the first heart transplant and the first IVF, it's like they saw a situation, a condition, and looked
Yeah, it's like
beyond it.
the word that came to mind then was they pioneered.
Mm,
They had a lot of information. They had, you know, they put in the hours, and then there was something that they saw, and they just had to go for it. There's no way they could not do what they've done. I was just thinking as well about, you think about early explorers, they must have become the experts of their day in navigating the seas and going to other countries and bringing stuff back. They would have been the go-to people, like, oh, what happened? What did you see? Where did you go? Who did you speak to? That whole gamut of information that they had, they must have been the celebrities who were the experts of their time. Christopher Columbus was one. You know, they pioneered things. They went after something.
Just to bring it back, I found the definition of expert, so I will read it to you. So, as a noun, an expert is a person who is very knowledgeable about or skillful in a particular area. And as an adjective, it's very similar, having or involving a great deal of knowledge or skill in a particular area. So, yeah, when I read that, it was like, oh, so I was a skincare expert.
Yeah.
Because I think one of the things with the experts, it's like you just use the word celebrities. It's like they're up there. They're kind of on a pedestal. They're, you know, bright and shiny, and us mere mortals. And I suppose that comes back to the imposter syndrome, and does it as well, doesn't it? It's like, I'm just a normal person. Like, how can I be an expert?
Who's interested in me? Yeah. And I also think that there are many experts out there that we know nothing about because they're in a very specialized field. So archaeology, sailing, I don't know, kickboxing, I don't know. But I bet, because none of that is my thing, that within those communities, those named professions, careers, that there are many experts that have really put the time and effort in to learn, to know, to focus in on one topic within a broader range of topics.
Yeah. So I was just thinking when you were talking then about, I was watching a film recently where the crawdads sing.
Yeah, yeah.
Is that
Lovely
such a good
book.
film?
Lovely book.
I've not read the book, but the film was so good. If you haven't watched it, I recommend it. And I was thinking about the lead character in that lives in a marsh, and she like grew up in a marsh and just knows the plants and the animals and the creatures so intimately because she's grown up with that environment, and she sketches and writes about them, and then somebody suggests that she get in touch with a publisher. And first of all, obviously she's like, imposter syndrome overload, why would anybody be interested? And then she becomes a published author, and then suddenly she's an expert in this thing. And thinking about the people that we hold as experts now is the people who have written the books, the people who have been interviewed on podcasts, the people who have spoken on stage. It's that as soon as you get into a more public arena, oh, now you're the expert in this. Because people know you, like you're saying. I'm sure there's experts in other fields that we literally have no idea about. But as soon as they're in the public eye, they're the expert.
Yeah.
So
Well,
I should have just written a book on skincare, and then I would have been an expert.
Well, it's that whole thing of, and it's a very, to my mind, very weird thing that we believe what's written in black and white. So it must be true. It's in a book.
Yeah.
That book's been sold. You know, it could be made up on ChatGPT, let's face it, these days. There's a lot of that going on. Okay. Oh, what an interesting topic. I'm glad you posed the question. I still don't consider myself an expert in grief and loss. I have my experiences, and the last couple of years I have been well and truly immersed in it as a specialist topic. But I believe there's a lot more I could learn. So
there's always going to be, whatever level you get to, there's always going to be more you can learn.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I also have this sense that it's not just learning it, it's being
Yeah.
able to retain it so that I can talk about it with someone. And one of my things is to bring together all the information I've got and look at whether there's a nugget of something within everything I've done that I want to focus on. And that focus, I think that's then when I've got that focus and I feel saturated with information and knowledge about that focus that I would then consider calling myself an expert,
Mm.
but not yet.
Yeah. And that's like goes back to what I was saying at the beginning, isn't it? There's a journey you have to go on. You can't just like today I'm going to be an expert in this thing and then just suddenly you're an expert. There is a journey that you have to go on to get to that point, both kind of through working in that field, that specialism, and also mindset wise, like coming to that point where you would be comfortable with calling yourself an expert.
Or be called upon as an
Yes.
expert to speak about
I think
things.
that's two very different things, though, isn't it? Other people calling you an expert and calling yourself an expert. Like, if other people call you an expert, oh, that's out of my control, they just did that. But to actually say, no, I am an expert, like actually claiming it and owning it for yourself, a very different thing, I think.
And I think then, I mean, this is a whole other, let's talk about imposter syndrome, perhaps we do that on another day. That, yeah, you can own it, claim it, and actually physically feel it, sense it in your own body, but you can't make someone else believe you.
Oh.
And that's their issue. So, and that goes back to Brené Brown and being the man in the arena.
Mm.
You're not prepared to put the time, the effort, the work in, not interested in what you've got to say. So, yeah, I love that thing of hers.
Yeah, we'll link that in the description as well.
Mm. Any more for any more?
Well, are we done?
I think we could be done.
I think we might be done.
So thanks everyone. Thanks for joining us, and we would love your comments, and we would always respond to you. So yeah, be in touch. Thanks for listening. Bye for now, everyone.
Bye.